She teaches courses in a broad range of literatures, both British and international. Her chief interests include 17th and 19th century British literature, the epistemological impact of global trade in the long 18th century, travel writing, the image of China in British literature, cultural theory, feminism, Chinese studies, colonialism, post-colonial literature and criticism, literature's intersections with visual arts, science, and philosophy. She received her PhD from the State University of New York at Stony Brook, and has published and presented her research very widely. Among the students in the English department, she is one of the most sought after and enjoyed lecturers. I know you'll find a great deal of reward in her talk today. Welcome, Dr. Chingling Well.
In the FYE series and being one of the faculty members to welcome you to the university. Yes, but I want to say something. While I'm setting up the talk, I would want you to focus on one question right now, and I might ask you to respond later on when we come to the third slide here, right? Which is the question of what happened when one's body is caught between global forces. Okay, so that's why. And I want to end, but not begin today's talk, narrating body and memories in the shadow of global forces, with an overview and a slideshow. The overview will actually give question on body, memory, and narrative, which you just saw, and then use the case of Agent Orange as a starting point. And then I'll give a short intro of the author, Amy Fan, really short intro. And then the third part will be narrative features of the novel. The fourth part will be analysis of scenes from Delta and Visitors, which I think are two of the most poignant chapters. And then 5 concluding thoughts. Okay, so this is a larger organization of today's lecture. Okay, there are many things to begin from the clip that I just shown. Can you hear me? One of the important things is that, Agent Orange, something that is shared between the attacker and also the victim, both sides fighting the battle, right? Become a memory, meaning that it's a material memory that circulates on a cellular level in the fat tissue, passed on from one generation to another. It allows us to actually think about memory in a totally different way, right? And to clean up the negativity would actually require cooperation from both sides. And the recognition of Agent Orange as an issue that actually prevent or facilitate the friendship between the Vietnamese people and the Americans is a grassroots movement from the bottom up, from body to body that eventually the government have to recognize. Particularly the US government have to recognize and reconcile with it, right? And this, I would say, is a good example of how we see things are being internalized and internalized in the bodies that we see depicted in the novel. Namely, that characters in the novel are like people who have experienced Agent Orange or experienced the war. They carry the scar of war long beyond one generation. Okay, and I have asked in the beginning, if you have responses to this first question, what happened when one's body is caught between global forces? Anyone who have a quick response to the question? Do you have examples? Any thoughts on that question? Yes? It can be destroyed. Good point, right? And it will be destroyed by an overwhelming force, right? Others? What happened when your body is being caught between global forces? Yes?
Well, I think you lose autonomy over your own self, over your own body.
You cannot control what happened to you, right? Your autonomy is compromised by the larger forces. Very good point. Others? Can you give example from the stories of people who are caught between global forces or who are under the shadow of global forces? Syrian refugees. So you have a very good, modern day example that really connect with us about, the babies from Operation Baby Lift, right? Right? It's something that's very similar, and very good. So I hope that those, present day example reminded us that, we continue to see bodies being, under global forces. Right? And a very good example will be, the first chapter story of Miss Lai. Right? She is an innocent young woman with moral rectitude. But being caught in global forces means that she gave birth to the baby. Right? A baby that she then naturalized thinking that it would be a good idea to give away. And, how would you actually describe the encounter between her and the person that gave, that fathers the baby? Do we know anything about that? Is it a love relationship? No. How many of you think it's a love relationship? Raise your hand. No one. How many of you think that it's a rape? Raise your hand. A lot, right? Right. So, in a way, you can actually understand how the novel is trying to show you, despite the fact that people might be innocent and totally moral, they will be put in a situation that they lost their autonomy and they have no control over what happened, right? And it becomes the responsibility of the larger community to figure out, what are we going to do once things like this is set in motion? Right? So I think that these are larger questions that we can think about and try to answer over the course of reading this book. And you have, the wonderful opportunity of actually being able to read this book over the spring break. And after this talk, I will also have some handouts that actually help you, like with chapter by chapter, questions. Okay? This I show you already, the Agent Orange link, and I want to point out that babies born under the influence of dark things, and the probably Americanized baby of the Operation Baby Lift, have a parallel. Right? Many of the babies are left behind. American and Vietnamese friendship to make Agent Orange's history, and also the story of We Should Never Met, also constitute another parallel of efforts trying to actually remove ourselves from some negative influence on the impacts that are highly negative, and move toward a space of healing. So in any case, I think that both, you can actually see interesting parallels between the case of the Agent Orange and also the story that's depicted in the novel. Born in 1977 and grew up in Orange County, author Amy Fan was not an orphan. As her first novel, We Should Never Meet, testified to the long shadow that the legacy of war and Operation Baby Lift cast on the Vietnamese American community. And in her writing, there's something about bearing witness to the community's experience, even if you are not experiencing it yourself biographically. Right? There is a communal memory that's being evoked. And I want to actually talk about the larger narrative structure of the novel. One of the important features is that the novel is a whole juxtaposition of 1960s and 70s Vietnam through the story of Lan, Truck, Fawn, Hua, and Bridget, and the 20,000 Southern California, mostly in Little Saigon, through the story of Kim, Bak Vin, May, and Huang. The novel brought together different perspectives of people who are stakeholders of the operation, across gender, class, and different political affiliations. The opening story represents the sharp contrast between the life on the eve of Vietnam War and the life disrupted or distorted by the war. The theme is formally played out in the first story by the flashback of Miss Land's upbringing, which cut through the narration of her giving birth and then ending up giving up the baby to a Catholic orphanage. And the opening story then was brought back to a full circle when it ends with the baby returning back to Vietnam after their college age in the last story, Motherland. Sorry for leaking the plot line out. Does the full circle suggest a happy ending, or does it put happy ending into questions? Right, this is the question that you can continue to ask. Happy ending is difficult because the present-day reality of Vietnamese gangs in Southern California still inflicted violence against members of its own ethnic group. The way characters live the consequence of colonial legacy of divide and conquer rather than the unity of their shared ethnic background. Therefore, we can say, someone else's war is waged on them, cutting through old social fabrics, local and global, over generations, over their bodies and their land. In other words, their body and the living memory tell the short-term and long-term consequence of being on the front line of global forces. The novel conveyed the message of bodies under the shadow of complex global forces through some interesting narrative features, which I list and put them below, and kind of like your toolbox for playing with this text. Open narration is a narrative that has many characters and no foreseeable ending. Nonlinear narration is a narrative that does not follow chronological progression. Such a way of storytelling often uses techniques such as flashback or flash forward. Interactive narrative is a narrative that works like an interactive game, allowing the reader to construct his or her own reading or storylines. And I will say that after you have finished the book, you can actually consider how would you interact with the story, seeing them all as separate, and then reassemble them in your own way, and perhaps even write a new conclusion for it, or add a different chapter to it. So you can totally see the novel not as a sequential text, but rather an interactive text. Multiple plot lines. The novel made great use of multiple plot lines to highlight conflict. Usually it cuts a scene at the most intense moment, so it helps intensify what you feel when you are reading, right? Okay, string of conscious enables the reader to see things from the subjective viewpoint of one or more character. A typical feature is that the eyes that see, the focalizer, are different from the voice that tells the story, the narrator. The narrative style can have the effect of suspending or even challenging the authority of an omniscient narrative and its underlying assumptions. Were you able to actually read? Is it too blurry? Should I, dim the light? Okay, and then more features. Ruptures of character arc or character development. In many narratives, character development are central to the narrative tension, and the reader can more or less anticipate a character arc, trajectory, or character development. In We Should Never Meet, the life of many of the characters does not follow conventional trajectory of development. For example, in the first story, Miss Leon doesn't grow up to be a chaste and virtuous young woman like any girl from a good family. Despite Miss Liang's moral rectitude, she ended up in a place where one could never anticipate from her family upbringing. Her virginity was robbed from her. She gave birth to a baby despite never wanting one, and she was put in a position that she cannot have the baby. Okay, and use of irony. Good example we find in the way that the title emancipation and bond were used in an ironic way in contrast to the storyline. Right? Multiple viewpoint and its center. What's the center of all these stories? What larger narrative does the smaller story bring forward? In the story entitled Delta, the reader is put in the awkward position between the now estranged Truck and Fawn. The evolution of the popular between them were ruptured by the advancement of war. The two families' different political stance only vaguely hint. The sheer number of the orphans, the need for charity work, and the advent of Catholic institutions to meet the need become forces that actually make their love almost impossible, but also bring them closely together to work together. Okay, so these are important features that you can actually use to actually further dig into the stories. I'm not going into the timeline of the Vietnam War, even though this will be a resource for you down the road. And then I created these images of Vin, Kim, May, from actual pictures of Vietnamese Americans. This is a gang member, and this is somebody who was killed in a cafe fight, and this is someone who wrote a story about her immigrant story in the archive. Okay? And as I said, I want to focus on analysis of scenes from Delta and Visitor. Yeah. This is one of the most natural images in the pre-war Vietnamese countryside. Dark in the rice paddies formed a balanced ecosystem. In this ecosystem, dark would actually keep the wheat and pass free from the field, whereas the field would then shelter and provide food for the dark. Right? So it's a nice symbiosis. And this is also the image that represents the love before the war, right, from the two families. The balanced ecosystem is disrupted by local and global forces. As you can see in the passages that I'm quoting here, there were some concerns of spending the money on a new house with the war threatening to push its way into the Delta. Truck's father becomes sympathetic to the intellectual in the village who spoke eloquently on the South government's bowing to foreign nations' demand and the necessity of ridding their country of international influences. We can survive as two halves, his father told his family at the supper when they discussed political matters, which was becoming more often. Under a puppet government, the South will crumble. We need the North with us. Truck's family represents sympathizers of the Northern communists, whereas Fong became attracted to Catholicism, a religion of the French colonizer. In this episode, we see, as readers, watch the estranged lover reunited for the goal of transporting orphans. The rural orphans are to be taken to the better equipped orphanage in Saigon, where we will also know two characters, Bridget and Hua. The intimacy of their encounter with war is symbolized in these scenes whereby Tark is asked to kill and guard the dogs for the market due to the family wartime economic need, which is on page 66 or 67 if you have the book. And I'm going to read out the scene where his family is instructing him how to kill a bird. It's just a stupid bird. It was born to die. Now put your hand around its neck. Lock your finger together. That's it. Now squeeze. See how their eye puff on socket a bit? That's how you know it's working. Keep going harder. Do it fast. You just have to break it. It's easier that way. See how the eyes are getting glassy? See how you can tell by looking in their eyes. Looking into the eyes of the dying bird, what are we seeing? Tuck's grip held tight. His gaze locked into the bird's. Like Fawn's eyes, so dark and wild and hard, you wonder what thought cowered behind them. Like a human being, gazing into the dead and suffering of innocent children for too long. What can we get out of Fawn's eyes? What lesson is to be gained from it when we look into that eyes? Together with a chapter entitled Delta, the visitors also illustrate acts of innocence, acts of violence that are ramification of the past and present divide. In the visitor, we as a reader first encounter a kind college student who helped dignified but poorly adjusted Vietnamese old man, Bác Nguyen, carry his grocery. Bác and the young man had great conversation, if you remember. Bác invited the young man to have tea at his house, and he even brought out the legacy jewel box of his wife, who was killed in the war. Right? However, as we know, later on, Bác was robbed by the student who told us that his name is Vin. Right? And that's an interesting irony in that story when we realized in that moment when the student declared his name will be, uh-oh, right? Oh, shit. Right? We have great empathy toward Bác at that moment, right? So there, the dramatic reversal turned the scene of charity and goodwill into that, oh no, when the student told Bác his name is Vin, and our shock at the ironic reversal for the friendly situation, knowing the impending doom of the planned robbery to be conducted by Vin's gang, is another divide that's illustrated here in their friendly conversation on their way home. Right? And here I will read it out loud. We lost so many people, Bác said. They have taken so much from us. Yes, the communists were heartless. You misunderstand, Bác. I don't mean the communists. I was talking about the Americans. They destroy our country, then they left. To ease their guilty conscience, they took some of us in. It's really simple. Bác Nguyen wondered what this young boy know about the war and the Americans' role. And I will continue to read. Where all the anger came from. He saw it in his own children, the passionate, resolute ideology, the black and white view of history. Only with time, experience, and loss could a person realize that there isn't simply one bad guy or one good guy. That in war, there are many sides at fault. Right? Well, the only moment questioned U.S. involvement with Vietnam will end with this view of Bác. The context of the novel set him as a naive, wise old man whose view cannot really be trusted. Bác came from a wealthy then-owning class and was likely against Vietnamese unification. His children continue to prosper in the U.S., unlike the gang members. Right. Concluding thoughts. Similar to the herbicide Agent Orange, and their unexploded bombs and landmines that continue to claim their victims' lives even long after the war is over. The bodies of the baby and their bodies' internalization of the conflict around them testify to the long shadow of the Cold War and how a proxy war is waged on the character's body, life, and community, both local and global, which result in not only biological orphaning, but of a communal nature. That sentence is impossibly long, right? Do you get what I mean, though? You can only actually layer it in one sentence, and it will be impossibly long, but you can still get what I mean. It means that these people, their lives, are part of the global forces. And the violence that they experience are not their own, but other people's. And it cannot be stopped by just ending their life, right? It continues on. On the other hand, across the boundaries of nations, anti-Vietnamese war movement represent the people's history of global unity, right? It's not just the pressure within in the US that actually make anti-war movement possible. It was all around internationally, right? And the novel perhaps suggests it is a full circle that takes every one of us to help complete. Okay? And I want to actually, just make you take a look at the follow-up activity that you can do. I'm not going to read it out. I want to actually conclude with a video clip about Agent Orange. And since we have some time. Climate in which reading this book made me afraid of the fact that this book might resonate and confirm some people who believe that immigrants and refugees are bad hombres. However, I hope that with a larger global perspective, we know that the real history of the U.S. is of a people's history. That so many people come from war-ridden places, come to here and want to build a collective alliance with each other, right? That it's not a history of hate. It's not a history of saying, don't come in. It's a history of welcome, and that's actually solve the issues together. That's actually, bring up new platforms and new movements that actually peacefully resolve issues around the world. That should be what we remember. And that's what made me proud to be a green card holder in this country.
Could you repeat the question, please, Chingling?
Asked me to talk about the motivation behind Operation Baby Lift, particularly in light of the rather tense conversation between the student and Bach, right? Which is actually a very tricky question. I want to say that there's definitely goodwill and willingness to take responsibility, right? However, is it enough? It's a very Buddhist thing. I would say that when I first read this novel, We Should Never Meet, I felt like, a Buddhist sentiment of the fact that everyone who is a sentient being, right, is then suffering, right? And it's really very much of a reminder of that. If you read the story of Bond, which is about a U.S. Doctor for children, like suddenly, pediatrician, about U.S. pediatrician who actually leave her baby behind in order to help the Vietnamese babies. But eventually, she was ill-received by the U.S. population, including her own family. She was even not qualified to adopt one of the baby that she really bonded with. right? And I think that that kind of story tells you that even with the best intention in the world, it doesn't mean that things won't go wrong. It doesn't mean that in the larger ramification of things, there won't be a butterfly effect that make what your goodwill trying to, to achieve become something that's yet another disaster, right? Right. So that would be my response to that. And I would say that in a way, it's precisely within that larger scope of empathy and understanding that this novel needs to be read. Now, we should not really, conclude with the motherland and think that it's an easy full circle. It will only be a full circle when the real possibility of Vietnamese and American friendship become really solid. Right. Other questions? Yes?
Could you talk a little more about the generation of trauma as a result of this conflict beyond Asian French?
The generation?
Trauma.
The generational trauma as a result of this conflict beyond Agent Orange? I can only probably touch the surface of it, illustrated by this novel, right? Which will be the fact that the whole community is torn apart between the North and the South, the communist and the free capitalist world, right? And the people who might come over here were the one who has to more or less subscribe to the capitalist worldview, whereas the people who are left behind in Vietnam will be, either embracing communism or they will be secretly wanting to be part of the capitalist world but cannot, right? And that creates almost like a fractal divide between community or even between oneself, right? It's never really just one person. You can actually be divided between the two worlds as well, right? And the children who grow up in the US then will continue to either like the US and don't like Vietnam because of its communist history, or they will actually hate the US and still couldn't go back to Vietnam because that's not somewhere that they know, right? And that you can actually see that the larger US system, the foster care system, was not really ready to receive them, right? Even with a lot of goodwill, right? Nevertheless, I would say that the stories say that there is hope and there's possibility. You can only do your best. Right? You can only do your best. And then, the more we are willing to actually take someone else's children as our own, the more chances of them to fare well, right? But I'm very hesitant about that picture, particularly given today's climate, right? So I want to actually say that some activists would argue that it's actually best to leave children in their own native culture. But we have long passed that kind of historical moment, right? Because in a way, the world that we live in is highly globalized. No one of us is pure. Global forces are under us or entrenching us all the way around. Right? There's no way that we can actually say, we are purely here. Everything that we consume and everything that we read and write about, right, are part of the global world. What's your response to that question that you ask? I wonder. Yeah?
Well, given that last part that you just brought up about leaving things in the native culture, I'm going to give that a lot of thought. I'm going to give that last bit a lot of thought because I think it sort of feeds into this whole notion of imperialism that we have in our country, sort of the white savior kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you said you're connecting that to the white savior. Yeah. That's a good thought. Yeah. And I would say that, based on what you said, maybe perhaps we can actually say that to believe in only the white savior would actually to not believe in the children. and not believing that the children will find a way, right? And in a way, we have to believe in the fact that regardless of how destroyed the situation, the children always find a way, right? And we, if we are in a position to be willing to love and be led by the children, would also find a new way as well. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.